Okay guys, are you ready? Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you for another one of my famed movie slash Blu-ray reviews. Today I'm coming at you to review the movie and the recently released Blu-ray by Arrow Video of The Prey. Pretty scary looking. As always, I'll review the movie and then I'll talk about and also review, of course, the recently released Blu-ray by Arrow Video. This movie I had never seen. I can, now that I've seen the reversible cover art option in the Blu-ray release, I can remember having seen this cover probably at video stores in the 80s or the 90s, I would imagine. Unfortunately, the cover didn't really, and the title didn't really, it isn't really that big a deal, so unfortunately I never ended up seeing it. Of course, it would turn out to be something that's completely up my alley, like a stock and slash movie from the early 80s, late 70s. It's totally completely up my alley in the tradition of things like The Prophecy, Just Before Dawn, The Forest, Don't Go in the Woods, and things like that. So I didn't know anything about this movie or that it was, right along those lines of Stalk and Slash in the Woods until, of course, the Arrow video release came out, and I'm like, ooh, what's this? And I looked at the trailer on YouTube, and then I'm like, oh wow, that's right up my alley. And then actually, I was able to, for the very first time to see it on YouTube. Someone had uploaded the Thorn EMI, presumably VHS version of it to YouTube. And I was able to see it that way because I was contemplating a blind buy from Arrow Video, and I'm like, I don't know, let's see if it's on YouTube, and luckily it was, and hopefully it still is for people, for those of you who may not have seen the movie. I did watch it, and at the end of the day I was like, huh. And I was on the fence. I didn't, based on seeing it on YouTube off the VHS, I was like, yeah, I don't know. Should I pay? Of course, the version I got is the limited edition Arrow Video version, which was upwards of $20 or close to $30 actually for the limited edition version with the limited to 3,000 copies. And I'm like, gosh, do I want to spend upwards close to $30 on this movie? And I just went back and forth. And I actually originally decided not to, but then I'm like, you know what? This movie, I looked at the screenshots, the Blu-ray screenshots, this is just right up my alley, even though the movie might not be the most amazing thing in the world. I just went ahead and I just got the Blu-ray, and I'm glad I did. I've seen it twice now. The first version was the normal version, then I just watched today the international cut with the gypsy footage so I could talk about that. But this is definitely going to become one of those movies that I watch in the spring slash summer, those kind of months and stuff, and maybe even in the winter when I'm, desiring that kind of, atmosphere and that weather and stuff like that. But it's definitely going to be one of those spring slash summer movies for me to get out every year and watch, annually or, around that kind of year. It's definitely that kind of movie. Basically, the premise of this movie, well, before I start with the review, this movie I guess was shot in 79/80, and it didn't actually end up being distributed until like 84 or something like that. Like New World picked it up, and I don't know if there was probably a limited theatrical run, and of course then Thorn EMI would end up putting it on VHS and stuff. So this movie, it's kind of, there's several instances of that kind of thing with movies, low budget movies, where they're made and sometimes not distributed for years and years later, like Blood Rage and things like that. So this movie basically starts with, I can only assume it's just stock footage of a forest fire of it's like 1948, and it's just this kind of cheesy. One thing I will say before I start the review of this movie is like the ultimate cheese fest. I mean, doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of cheese, but it's really, really low budget, so it's got a nice amount of cheese. So basically the opening is 1948, and it's just the stock footage of, forest fires in California, presumably, and they kind of have the sound of the burning. And what's so funny is you don't see, actually you do see some guy ducking down in one of the shots. They're cutting from all different kinds of forest fire shots, and there is this one guy crouched down. So I don't know exactly what the deal is. I didn't even see him until like the second or third time I watched this movie, and I'm like, what the hell I don't know if the editor probably didn't even see him, in that shot. But it's just basically shots of forest fires and like all this, you know, group. There's like a group audio of people like like people are basically indicating that people are trapped in this forest fire and perishing and dying in the forest fire, and it's just kind of cheesy but kind of cool because, you know, the forest fire footage is good, even if it is just stock footage or whatever, and the sound of the fire and the people moaning and perishing is just like, ah. So you know how, you know, in a lot of horror movies and stuff, you'll have a pre-credit sequence. Well, the pre-credit sequence is just that, several shots of like, you know, just forest fire and people like, ah, and then it's just like the opening credits are really cool with just a moon and the opening credits over a shot of the full moon and stuff, and the music's kind of cool for the opening credits, and if I'm not mistaken, the guy who did the music for this may have been the same guy who did the music for the original Hills Have Eyes. I think it's the same guy. If it's not, it's not, but I think it's the same guy. So then once the opening credits are over, we cut, and I do want to say one thing about this movie is when we cut to present day, quote unquote, they actually say, you know, this same location and then 1980, and I really, really, really appreciate that whenever a movie does that, which is not very often. A lot of times in movies over the years, and I really despise it because when you watch a movie 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, it obviously doesn't apply when you show something in the past and then you cut to quote-unquote present day when the movie was made and or came out. They say present day, and I hate that because if you're watching a movie from 1980 in 2019 or 2020, it's obviously not present day. So I really, really appreciate that when someone goes, okay, so it's such and such a spot, 1980. And that way when you're watching it 40 years later or 50 years later, it's like, ah, that's so much better than present day. And the majority of movies that I've seen that do that start with something in the past and then cut to quote-unquote present day, most of them say present day, and I just, oof, that's a bummer. So basically, the first scene we see of present day 1980 footage is this middle-aged couple that are at night, and it's a really, really just kind of an atmospheric scene. I mean, the whole movie is atmospheric because the majority of it's filmed out in the woods, which I love. But this scene is really, you know, lit really well, and you got nice ambient sounds. Middle-aged couple are, you know, camping out at night, and they're just finishing up with dinner. And this woman who looks a lot like, it's so funny. This is like filming probably exactly the same time as Friday the 13th. And this woman is like, could be like Betsy Palmer's double, even the outfit she's got on, and it's just crazy. It's like probably filming almost exactly the same time Friday the 13th is. And it's like, this one's filming West Coast, Friday the 13th is over there filming in the East Coast. It's just absolutely crazy. But this woman, as I said, who could be, you know, Betsy Palmer's double in Friday the 13th, even down to the outfit, the sweater she's got on and stuff, takes the dishes to go wash them in the lake, and you know, the husband gets up and smoking a pipe and gets up and goes to chop some wood. And I will say that right off the bat, right in this scene when the movie starts, you get this sense already that one of my problems with the movie is, I don't know, maybe the editor wasn't too incredibly, terribly gifted, or at least in my opinion. And there's a lot of scenes that just seem to just drag, and it's unfortunate that, you know, it starts so early on in the movie, but they just keep kind of cutting back between him chopping wood and her walking towards the lake, chopping wood, walking towards the lake, almost to the point, it's like twice as much, in my opinion, that should be there, but whatever, it's, you know, it's his movie, he can do whatever the hell he wants. And then we kind of just hear like, oh, you know, the guy screams, and she runs back to the campsite to see his decapitated, you know, neck stump kind of sitting on the chopping block and spewing out blood, which is kind of cool and stuff. And then we just see her like go, ah, like look up at the axe, and they see this bloody axe that goes like this. And one thing I don't like about it is it actually, if it, you know, should have just went down, but it goes down and back up and then down again, and it's just like, oh, come on. It's like, I don't know, like just down, whatever. But so I mean, right off the bat, you pretty much know. This is why I was on the fence about buying the Blu-ray. Right off the bat, you pretty much know that this is a horror movie made by, I don't know, it's just low B-grade horror movie. But of course, you know, you guys all know if you watch some of my reviews and stuff that I'm all for that, especially out in the woods with young nubile women and stuff, which this does have. Not a whole hell of a lot of nudity, unfortunately. It's kind of just flashed in front of your face or whatever, but so there's that. Oh yeah, before I move on from this scene, one thing that I do want to say, which is really cool about it, is that obviously when you've got like a POV shot while this couple is sitting at the fire or whatever, and you've got a POV shot from the woods, and it's kind of like looking at the, the campsite and them sitting at the fire from a distance, and you can see a little bit of the campfire. And then what it's really cool is it'll do is it'll be like, it'll like flash cut and back to the shots of the the forest fire from the beginning of the movie, so instantly. It's a really great editorial way of basically telling the audience that this is a survivor of the forest fire from the 1948 or whatever. And that was really cool. That's probably one of the coolest things about this movie, to be honest, is just whenever the killer sees someone having a fire at night, it's like just flashes of the flashback of the forest fire. So that's kind of like, from what I can gather by watching this movie, the reason why the killer kills is pretty much killing anyone who has a fire, because, obviously a forest fire is what probably killed his family or whatever. One thing that I didn't mention, we find out later on in the movie through exposition, is the survivor was probably a member of a gypsy family or whatever, lone survivor presumably of a gypsy family that was living in the woods at the time of the forest fire or whatever. So that was a cool element to have. It's kind of like The Burning. It's another movie that I didn't reference at the beginning of the video. The same kind of thing, made around the same time. Although that was, I think, made around probably made in 1980, I think, or whatever, and came out in 82 or 81 or something like that. But yeah, that's one of the coolest elements about this movie for me, is like whenever the killer, it happens like twice in the movie, whenever the killer sees a fire, campfire, to like flashback to the forest fire, and kind of the rage of like, damn you, you're gonna burn my woods down. So just like so many of these movies, this movie follows a van full of 3 couples, 3 guys, and 3 girls heading off into the woods. And it's so funny because it's kind of like Summer Camp Nightmare. And the van trip up to the woods, they're like singing some dumb kind of song. I haven't seen this movie enough to be able to sing any of it, but it's kind of funny and dumb at the same time. Mostly dumb, but, well, funny, dumb and funny. So they arrive, and I will say all 3 girls are relatively attractive, and one of the girls is actually, having just recently rewatched and reviewed the Arrow video release of Bloody Birthday, and one of the girls is one of the main girls, one of the last 2 to survive to the end of the movie, is the babysitter, slash big sister from Bloody Birthday. So that was really kind of fun seeing her in this, and I would imagine this is before Bloody Birthday, and she was, she's got a great look, I think, and a really great late 70s, early 80s look. So it was really cool to see her in this movie, and this other chick who's like the lead. It was like, I think this is her first movie, and she's really cute. And of course the blonde. I'm not big on blondes, but the the kind of the whatever, just always looking in the mirror kind of Barbie doll blonde is obviously attractive as well. And you got the 3 guys that they're with, and then there's this other guy who shows up as kind of the forest ranger guy, and his voice is really familiar. I must have seen or heard his voice in something else before I saw him in this movie. Really familiar, but upon getting to the camp area where they're going to hike into the park and hike into the woods, they meet this forest ranger guy and say a little bit of hellos and do this and that, and they end up hiking into the woods, and of course setting camp and stuff. One of the problems with this movie, and one of the things I didn't even mention, is upon my first viewing, I don't know, that a lot of people have a problem with, and I agree to a certain extent. I think that a lot of people have a problem with all the nature shots, and from what I understand, the nature shots very well could be just stock footage and stuff. I mean, granted, they're really, really great shots, macro, super zoom shots of, little bugs and frickin' whatever, bugs crawling around and snakes eating a rat or a mice or whatever, and ants and all these icky kind of creatures crawling around, and frogs and, insects and super macro shots and stuff, and owls, eating shit on the ground and whatever. Not shit, but I mean, presumably a dead animal or whatever. Yeah, so I can confirm that after seeing this movie a couple times. Well, the international cut doesn't have as many shots, so I've only seen the normal version twice. And I mean, it's just got, yeah, I concur that, I mean, although I'm a big nature guy, I think that, I think that some nature shots are fine, like towards the beginning of the movie, but you know, if you get to the midway point of the movie and it's like dawn and you're just starting them, you know, the next day with just more nature shots, and I don't know, it just, in my opinion, I do concur with the majority, or with, you know, a lot of the people that complain about this movie and the fact that there's too much nature shots. I do agree. I think that, you know, of course that's just going to be personal preference. I mean, there's a fine line between what's enough and what's too much, and you know, I think the international cut has a decent, is actually a decent amount of nature footage, whereas the original theatrical cut just has, in my opinion, just too many nature shots. It's just like, you know, once you get into the halfway point of the movie and the kids are all frickin' eating at a campfire at night and stuff, just cutting to creepy crawlies crawling around and a snake eating a mouse or a rat or whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's just like, what are we doing here? And then later on, this is actually like, yeah, later on there's this scene where, at night, where we just see, I don't know, yeah, this is before the couple there's a, you know, one of the couples dies that night or whatever, one of the nights, and we just cut to the ranger guy playing a banjo. Obviously the actor could play banjo for real, so they just interjected that in the movie, and it's just like, it's just like, why are we just seeing him play, and then we cut away to, like, you know, the kids, and then two of them die, and then there's just this crazy ass scene. It's almost like the editor did this unknowingly or by mistake, where like after this one chick gets suffocated with the sleeping bag, then we just cut to the guy, like, you know, putting a beer down, or the guy with the banjo just sitting there putting a beer down or grabbing it or something, and then we'll cut back to the woods, and it's like, oh my god, like that was a complete just, that had to have been an editorial mistake that I just can't even imagine. So I will say that, you know, the international cut, although I prefer the, you know, the original version to the international has some things going for it, because some of the stuff that they cut out I agree with. They actually cut out the banjo playing stuff, which I agree with. They actually they cut out the wide-mouthed frog bit, which, you know, I don't necessarily think you have to cut it out, but surely having it be gone really isn't a negative thing either. But, you know, I'd say if I was doing a Nate cut, you know, cut out the banjo, or at least cut out the shot of him just, you know, randomly placed there after the death of that girl, and you can keep wide-mouthed frog. But I agree with a lot of the cuts, a lot of the trims that the international cut does, to be honest. And to be honest, you know, maybe an ideal cut of this movie would be, you know, international version without the gypsy footage, you know, just the kind of the nature stuff cut down, and banjo scene and wide-mouthed frog story cut out and stuff. But you know, it's personal preference. Obviously, the filmmakers did what they wanted to do, and more power to them. I'm just here sharing my thoughts about what they shot and cut and put out or whatever. One thing, you know, another problem that I have with this movie is it's just like, you know, there's character bits between the characters and stuff, but you know, there's just scenes where they're just walking into the woods, you know, and they're just walking and not talking, and by the time they get to the first night scene or whatever it is, or one of them, yeah, I think it's the first night scene, and they're all huddled around the campfire eating and stuff. It's like, and I kind of agree, I kind of like it and kind of don't at the same time. It's not really done very much in movies, and maybe that's the reason it rubs me the wrong way, where there's this scene around that where they're all, you know, all six of them around the campfire, and they're like talking to each other, and it's like, I think it's like real ad-libbing. And they're shooting it in a way where we're supposed to be like a, you know, like a seventh party, or, you know, outside party, kind of like looking at them and not really being a part of their conversations, because we don't hear like one coherent conversation. It's like, you know, the three couples are like almost each having their own conversation, and we never get a full version of any of it, and it's just kind of, it's just supposed to be a scene of just like, you know, just indicating that they're talking, but, you know, the stuff that they're saying is, we don't really get the full picture of any of it, and it's just weirdly kind of off-putting. I mean, I understand what they were going for, but at the same time, I mean, I half like it and half don't like it. By this time in the movie, as a viewer, I found myself kind of starved for more, I don't know, scripted character development slash interaction. Like, let's, we spent, a decent amount of time with them walking into the woods, and, although they do say stuff here and there, they don't really talk very much to each other, and it's just like, I don't know, by this campfire scene, it's just the movie's kind of off-putting at this point, because it's like, let's have some, funny, I don't know, interactions, and I guess there are funny interactions, but it's just in this weird way where we're like eavesdropping on them, and it's just really a weird, this is really a weird movie, and I guess one could say maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's unlike so many movies that are by the numbers and cut and dry, and so many movies that do the same thing over and over. This, in its defense, might be an interesting movie to check out, because it is different in so many aspects. But to me, I would almost regard it as being different, not so much in a creative, like I'm going to be different way, almost more like filmmakers not necessarily knowing so much of what they're doing kind of a way. But if you watch it and see it as they meant to do this, and they meant to be, have it this way and whatever, I mean, that's fine too. I'm just giving my take on it. Of course, like so many movies made around the same era, this movie features, it might be his last actually on-screen performance of Jackie Coogan. Jackie Coogan, of course, pretty much started his career as the Kid in the Charlie Chaplin silent film, The Kid. And I looked online, and I looked at his filmography, and might very well be his last movie. I guess he had a stroke relatively soon before he did his part in this movie, so if you're a Jackie Coogan fan, that might be something that might interest you. I mean, in my opinion, his stuff is just he's just sitting at a desk. He's, kind of another ranger guy sitting at a desk, and he's the character who gives expository dialogue to the other ranger guy that we introduced in the Wide-Mouthed Frog Ranger guy about the gypsies, and, the whole, story in the past with that, and one small boy who he saw in the fire. He got a glimpse of this small boy, gypsy boy, was burned, really burned horribly or whatever, and it's just kind of goofy that, he'd see some kid and there wouldn't be any effort to, like, put the kid out or rescue the kid. It's just kind of weak storytelling. Like, why would you, as a rescue, the Jackie Coogan character was a rescue person or trying to put the fire out in 48, and if you were there doing that, why would you get a glimpse of a kid and not, like, rush in and try to save the kid? It just kind of makes absolutely no sense. But what I'm saying is, just like so many scenes in the movie, like with the bearded park ranger guy playing a banjo and stuff, this scene of Jackie Coogan is just kind of like, I don't know, although it's not very long, it's not really interesting. It's like, it's like expository dialogue done in probably the most boring way really you could do it, and it's just like, so, although this movie does have, a lot of things that I love about it, just, nubile women and beautiful filming location, and, filmed in late 70s, early 80s, and just a Z-grade kind of a B, low-budget horror movie. There's a lot about it that is actually not exactly easy to get through and watch. So you people, you're watching this review and you might not have seen the movie. I'll just briefly, you keep hearing me saying wide-mouthed frog bit. Well, and it's really funny. I remember the scene being earlier on in the movie, but it's actually like midway point in the movie. I scanned through the original version, the original cut, just before I did this review, and I'm like, oh, I thought that was early on in the movie. It's this gag where this bearded forest ranger guy is telling, this wide-mouthed frog. I'm not going to obviously tell the joke, but it's just some kind of corny joke. And, the gag is that, and they kind of the editor screws up because he gives it away halfway through the story that he's talking to a little baby deer as he's feeding him. If I were the editor, I would have held off on that reveal until afterwards, because why they show, that's the whole part of the gag. It would have been a better scene if they would have waited until after the story. Oh, you didn't like it, huh? Well, whatever. And the editor shows that he's feeding this baby deer like halfway through the wide-mouthed frog story, and it's just like, that's what I mean. It's like the editor maybe was not the most competent editor in the entire planet. So the next morning after the, one of the kind of the ditzy blonde and her boyfriend are killed, like I think on the first night or second night, or it's probably the first night, I don't remember. This movie is just so, I don't know, it just like goes on and on and on. So I think the first night the ditzy blonde and her boyfriend are killed and all their stuff's taken away, so the two other couples just assume they just up and left, which is completely not even realistic, but they take a vote whether or not to go for the police or just to continue their trip, and they vote to just continue their trip, which is another thing that's really not exactly realistic, but at the same time you can understand, this ditzy blonde is, got her boyfriend in her pocket or whatever, so the rest of the movie is just them. Basically, I think pretty much at this point, it's just the guys at this point are gonna climb this mountain, or not climb the mountain, go on. Do people really do this? I don't know. These guys have got all their mountain climbing gear, and it's like they go on top of the mountain, and then they like rope up, and then one of the guys, they're on the top, and this guy, basically goes down the side of it. Like, I don't know what the point of that is, just to be all macho or whatever. So I don't know if people actually do that for a thrill or whatever. I mean, I can't really understand climbing a mountain either, but that just makes more sense to me than, well, not really, because it's more work, but I don't know. I guess I didn't know that people just, when I saw these characters like going, starting at the top of the mountain and then throwing the rope off the cliff and like going down, I'm just like, what, do people do this? But whatever. So the second half of the movie is pretty much just, or maybe I'd say the last third of the movie is just the guys going up to do that, and the girls just kind of sunbathing. And I gotta tell you, that's one of my problems with this movie. There's not a whole hell of a lot to this movie. But if you're a nature lover, an outdoors lover like I am, and it seems like it's like Northern California, kind of with the big redwood trees and stuff. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful movie, and the Blu-ray looks so amazingly stunning that, there almost doesn't need to be much happening as long as you just have beautiful scenery. And unfortunately, that's kind of what this movie is. Not a whole hell of a lot happening, unfortunately. And even when kills do happen, like at the beginning of the movie, and even the killing of the, ditzy blonde and her boyfriend, well, I guess his neck is ripped out, so that's kind of cool. But I mean, it's not really a big, you don't see a lot of the kills. It's not really a movie for like creative or fun kills per se. I'd say the main thing about this you're going to get from this movie is just a really fun, goofy early 80s, characters and early 80s feel to it, and just beautiful scenery and stuff. The movie itself, like if you watched it like right after it came out, see, a movie like this that's like 40 years old now, is the movie itself might not be great, but the fact that it's 40 years old is more what makes it great. It's more like, people, there's much more, from what I heard, of a market out there for, let's say you take a low budget movie from 40 years ago, people are going to, including me, people are going to be much more interested in seeing that than the same movie, with adjusting for inflation, with the same budget being shot now. Like, would you rather see a movie shot on 4K digital video, shot this year, the same premise and stuff, or would you rather see the same premise, same budget, adjusted for inflation, shot 40 years ago on 35mm film, and late 70s, early 80s fashions and hairstyles and all that kind of stuff, and vehicles and stuff? Yeah, obviously you're going to want to see that. Well, most people watching these videos, or my channel anyway, are probably going to want to see that. So this movie's more about just the experience of a retro movie, more than the fact that the movie is any kind of accomplishment of any real, competence on its own, unfortunately. And one thing I will say before I end the review is you got John Carl Buechler, who did the monster effects, and also this, I don't remember his name right now, the guy who played the monster. I imagine he played other, tall things in movie career. I don't know if he's the guy who played, he might be this guy who played the tall in the remakes, the two Addams Family movies or whatever. I don't know, but this guy plays, and it's unfortunate that you don't really they kind of like with The Burning, they don't spend much time on screen, with the killer and the quote-unquote monster is revealed is at the very end of the movie. And for all the work that must have went into making the makeup and stuff, I mean, have it on screen a little longer. That's another one of my problems with this movie. But as a whole, I'd say that, gosh, you really need to have a appreciation for the outdoors and just early 80s kind of lowbrow Z-grade horror movies to really appreciate this movie. And even if you do appreciate those things, you still might not really appreciate this movie because it's unfortunately a lot of nothing. Don't get me wrong, there are fun things about it and goofy ass scenes and stuff, but this is why after I watched it on YouTube I was like, gosh, do I even want to spend nearly $30 on this? I'm glad I did. The Arrow video presentation is absolutely fantastic and makes it much more of a watchable experience than the original VHS version. So so basically, obviously, the two guys on the mountain, one guy, the rope's cut, one guy falls. It's just probably a dummy falling, and the other guy gets his neck twisted around by the monster on top of the mountain. And there's this brief chase with the two girls, and the best kill, in my opinion, of this whole movie. And it's cool that they saved it for last. I probably would have done the same thing. As one of the woman from Bloody Birthday is running and gets her foot caught in this noose and gets that's attached to this tree trap. So. Kind of like with Friday the 13th Part 2, the tree goes and sends her flying into the tree trunk and smash. There's this shot of this dummy that's, just goes face first into the tree trunk, and it's like, and it's like, oh man, that was cool. If the movie would have had more kills like that and stuff, it would be so much better. But that was really cool way to end the movie, and that was, I agree with saving that kill for last. And then there's this, of course, just like so many of these movies, like right when the main final girl kind of is trapped up against a tree with the monster, this what's his name, the forest ranger guy arrives with, and there's this kind of goofy plot point where he didn't want to take a rifle, he wanted to take a tranquilizer gun, which he regrets doing, and he shows up with to save the day with the tranquilizer. What's so funny is the tranquilizer doesn't do anything to the monster, and he goes to fight this guy and knocks him out apparently, and he's going to save the girl, and then the monster comes up from behind and grabs the guy and chokes him, just squeezes his neck and blood comes out of his mouth. And one thing I do like about the movie is the ending where, pretty much the good ranger guy dies. Normally, the ranger will hook up with the girl and happily ever after. So I do appreciate the fact that the ranger guy dies, and we see the monster approach the girl and kind of open, wide-eyed and smiles, and then we cut to like winter and then next spring and stuff in the cave where he lives in, and we kind of zoom in on the cave and we hear, well, that's my baby impersonation. It's not very good, but goo goo gaga. So basically implying that over the winter, basically the monster kept this girl for himself and impregnated her, and then had a gypsy monster, burn monster, offspring child or whatever. And there's no real reason to I think the viewer's supposed to assume, or whatever, is going to be a mutant baby, but there's no reason it'd be a mutant baby per se. I mean, the guy's a mutant, I think, because he's burned, not because he was born a mutant or whatever. But that's The Prey. It's as I said, I don't regret getting it. I'm glad I did. The Arrow video presentation is absolutely amazing. I'm afraid I'm only going to be able to go 1.5 stars, 1 and 1/2 stars out of 4 stars. I really want to be able to rate it higher, and don't get me wrong, it's not that I greatly appreciate the things that I really love about it a lot, like the beautiful scenery, and just the the early 80s, late 70s, just fashions and vehicles, what little vehicles there are in it, and the girls are cute and the guys are funny, and and some of the limited cool kills and just the atmosphere and stuff I do appreciate. But in my opinion, there's just a lot of stuff in this movie that just really just doesn't need to be there. And now on to my review of the recently released, I think this came out on October 1st in the United States, limited to 3,000 units, limited edition by Arrow Video, Blu-ray release, 2-disc Blu-ray release of The Prey. One thing I'll say off the bat, the slipcover I don't think is very good. It's supposed to be like the final girl. I don't know. I don't think the slipcover is necessarily that great. But the artwork that you'll see later on underneath the slipcover, the newly commissioned, or the other newly commissioned artwork, I think is better. So the thing that I guess, and this release is pretty well chock full of features. One thing that I will say about the limited edition version is the limited edition version is the only one that's going to include the second disc, which has the international cut, which I didn't talk about. The international cut is, what do they say on here? I was trying to find out how many minutes were added to the international cut. We'll just say it this way: the theatrical cut is 80 minutes long, and the international is 97 minutes long. So it's the international cut is this weird, goofy cut where someone not even, a completely different entity, not even related or having anything to do with the original production, went and shot, I guess, over 20 minutes of gypsy footage of, like, they just made this complete storyline for the reason of the forest fire where gypsies went and, it's just, oh my god. And it's cut into the movie like halfway through where the guy's going to tell a campfire story, and he's like, hey, you want to hear this story or whatever? And then they cut to the gypsy flashback footage, which is, like I say, is 20 minutes or longer. And it's its own story within the movie, and it just completely is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I will say that the gypsy footage, for what it is, I mean, it's not like it's, it might even be, the production of the gypsy footage might be technically more competent production than the movie, but it's just, having this placed into the movie is just so goofy, and it's almost like it's its own story within the movie, which is obviously way too long, which involves the gypsies, and then one gypsy guy screwed this one non-gypsy's wife, and then the wife went to tell he found a hickey on her neck, and then she made up a story that she was raped by a gypsy, and then this guy and his buddy, non-gypsy buddy, want to get revenge, and they basically set the gypsy camp on fire, and they set the whole woods on fire, and that's the reason for the fire at the beginning of the movie. That stuff could have been done a lot quicker than like 20 plus minutes of footage. And one thing I will say, I guess, about the gypsy footage that is kind of fun is it's got like little bit of boobies, or, well, not that there's, well, anyway, there's some skin, it's like it's almost like a porno production company made the gypsy footage stuff, because there's just so much of it is just simulated sex stuff, like 3 different simulated sex scenes, and it's just like, oh my god, it's just the weirdest thing you're ever going to want to see. And like I say, if you look at the gypsy footage on its own, it's probably more competently done than the rest of the movie. And one thing that I'd say, if I was going to do a Nate cut of the international cut, is maybe put the gypsy footage before the movie. Before the movie starts, and have it go into the stock footage of the fire, and then start the movie. But as it is, I mean, it's obviously being 20 plus minutes long. I mean, it's exposition that is just completely not even, it's just way too long. You don't need to go into all that kind of stuff with the gypsy screwing this guy's wife and her saying that it was rape and revenge. It's just, it took way too long to say that stuff, 20 plus minutes or whatever. So the limited edition version is going to be the second disc, which includes that the international cut with the gypsy footage that was filmed by a completely different production company and entity. And what's funny is I don't think no one even knows who the hell did it, which is really funny. But the version, the print of the gypsy scenes, I mean, it's just absolutely pristine like the rest of the movie. So I mean, it is, you're probably going to want to get the limited edition just to have, the gypsy stuff, because it's not like it's, pristine normal movie going to VHS gypsy footage. It's really pristine, the gypsy footage is just as pristine as the rest of the movie, and it's technically well done. But it's just, oh my god, the way it's inserted in the movie and stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. And another cool thing about disc 2 that it's got is, I haven't seen all of it, but I scanned through it just today. You've got an outtakes reel of 45 minutes of rare, never before seen footage from the cutting room floor. And it's all, I would imagine it's all silent stuff, but that's really interesting just to see, you know, the raw kind of the dailies, you know, the raw footage from the shoot. 45 minutes worth is, that's all, that stuff is really, I'm all for that. Anytime, you know, anytime any outfit wants to give me just the raw footage, I mean, I'm all for seeing that. It's really interesting to see things evolve take after take, and just to see the slates and see all this and that, and you know, people, it'd be so much funner obviously with the sound, but I'll take it with no sound over, you know, no footage at all. So before I talked about the disc 1, I did want to actually mention disc 2 and the limited edition. From what I understand, the limited edition aspects of this release is disc 2, and once those are gone, it'll probably just be a standard disc 1 release. When it's the important stuff anyway, with the majority of the special features. As you can see here, disc 1 US theatrical cut has a plethora of special features here. You got a brand new 2K restoration of the filmmaker approved US theatrical cut from the original camera negative, which is 80 minutes long. Brand new audio commentary with this Arrow Video guy, and I don't know who this woman is, Amanda, who, whatever. As I said, these people never have last names I can pronounce. Brand new audio interview with the director / co-writer Edwin Scott Brown. Brand new audio interview with producer / co-writer Summer Brown. And I will say those audio interviews are, it's like, I don't know why they don't call them just commentaries. I guess because it's not screen specific, but those interviews go like while the movie's playing. And I actually scanned towards the end of the movie with the Summer Brown, and it goes towards close to the end of the movie, the audio interview with her. I didn't do any of the commentary or the audio interviews. But then the same thing goes with the director, you know, the Edwin or whatever. Edwin Brown, his audio interview plays during the movie, and I didn't go very far into the movie to see how long it lasts, but we could be potentially looking at close to, you know, 3 movie running times worth of audio extras, you know, with the commentary and with the Arrow Video guy and the woman, and then the 2 separate audio interviews with, you know, the woman and the man kind of production team couple or whatever. As for the rest of the special features, you can just, you know, pause it and read them all if you want to do it. One thing that I will say that is really fun about this release is it features, just like with the Arrow Video Slayer release, the Blu-ray of the, you know, early 80s horror movie The Slayer. This movie has got a what do they call it here? The Prey. Yeah, they did a premiere restoration, or they premiered the restoration of The Prey at the Texas Frightmare Weekend in 2019. I think that took place in May. And so what the cool thing about this version is you've got the option to watch this with an audience reaction track of that screening. And that is really fun. And you know, I'd say that, you know, there's one for the Slayer, but unfortunately, the one with the audience reaction track for the Arrow Video release of the Slayer wasn't very interesting. It wasn't very eventful, and I want to say that there's a very good chance that the people that were at that screening maybe weren't necessarily horror fans. Maybe they were just like, oh, let's go see a movie that was filmed in this theater, in the theater they filmed it in, kind of a thing. Whereas this is probably more a theater full of horror fans. If it's a premiere at a Texas Frightmare Weekend, you understand what I'm saying in that regard. So unfortunately, they don't have a whole lot to react to. But what there is there to react to, it's really fun. You know, they laugh at just so many of the dumb character lines and stuff. And so I will say that although there's not a whole hell of a lot of reaction because there's not really a lot to react to, when they do react to stuff, the audience reaction track is really fun in this. It's probably not as good as the one that I've seen. I think I've only seen 3 at this point, and I think my favorite still is the Scream, or not the, what the hell am I talking about? Pieces, you know, at the Vine Theater or whatever, audience reaction track is still probably the best of the 3 that I've heard, but this one is the second best out of the 3 that I've heard. You know, Pieces and the Slayer, and now this one. It's actually a really fun way to watch the movie, and I always appreciate when they got audience reaction tracks. And so now on to the review of the actual image and sound. Absolutely stupendous image. Obviously, I have seen this on the original, technically, on the original, VHS Thorn EMI VHS release that someone uploaded to YouTube. So I have seen the, the more washed out, more, kind of just full frame, boring version of the movie. And oh my gosh, as it said in the back of the box, is that this is a 2K scan from what they say is the original camera negative. I mean, I can't even, having watched the Gypsy version today and scanned through the theatrical version today as well, I mean, looking at it again, I mean, I can't even stress how absolutely beautiful and amazing this movie looks on this Blu-ray presentation. And I'm so, like I say, I was on the fence. I didn't know if I wanted to get it or not. I'm so glad I did, because just like I said in so many of my reviews, towards the end of this year, like with Bloody Birthday, and that if you have a movie that might not necessarily be so great on its own, but having such a pristine video version of it, it makes it so much more enjoyable. And the colors, I can't even stress how amazing just all the colors look, and just the contrast and the brightness and everything. This might be one of the most greatest upgrades from the VHS to Blu-ray upgrades ever. I mean, it's just a stellar video presentation. The audio, on the other hand, obviously it's 1979/80 low budget movie. The audio, I found probably, I don't know, maybe half of the movie or more is a lot of times where there's just hiss, I don't know if it's from the production audio or whatever, but a lot of times there's just like a hum or kind of a hiss, just like a, in the background, like all the time. It might not last the whole entire movie, but it seems like it lasts, maybe half the movie or somewhere around that, or more or less, I don't know, whatever. So the audio isn't as amazing as the video presentation. Obviously, a lot of times that is the case with a movie that's, such a Z-grade production or whatever, but I can't stress how amazing the image looks. Absolutely amazing. And then with this release, of course, you've already seen the slipcover here, which I'm not too terribly crazy about, but underneath that you've got another newly commissioned cover art, which I think is a lot better. So presumably we've got two newly commissioned cover arts, the slipcase one, and then the underneath of the slipcase, which is newly commissioned cover art, which I like very, very much more, which really captures the essence of the movie. And that's our final girl and the monster and a campfire and a full moon and stuff. So I definitely like this under the slipcase newly commissioned cover art a lot more. And then, of course, which is so often is the case with a release like this, you've got not only the newly commissioned cover art, you've got the option for this cover art or the original poster/cover art. I think I can remember seeing this cover or this image in a video store in the 80s or the 90s or something. As you can see, the title and the artwork really didn't really interest me that much. I don't even know what it's chopping into, to be honest. It's not human, and it's got an axe. Oh, is that like a woman's dress or something? I think it's like a woman's dress, like he's chopping into the chest of some woman wearing negligee or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. That's, I guess, kind of what it looks like, but what's coming out of the top of I have no idea what this artwork is. That's why I never, obviously rented this from the video store or whatever, because, that artwork really, one of the rare cases where I kind of like the newly commissioned artwork of this, not so much the slipcase, but the newly commissioned cover art maybe more than I like this particular original cover art. Opening the case up, you'll see that here's disc 1 with the cover art, the newly commissioned cover art that I like. Disc 2 of the limited edition version with the international cut has the newly commissioned cover art that I don't like. And what's really fun is you get this like reproduction. I don't think you really even see one of these in the movie, but you get this reproduction of like a Welcome to North Point Keen Wild. This is a self-serve issue permit, good for a day only in the Keene Wilderness. This is really cool. It's like a reproduction of a permit, a day permit to the Keene Wild camping location is featured in the movie. This is really cool and a great idea. That's the front. The back. And then, look at this. Oh my God. Oh, they've got this, I don't know, they might have just made this up, but then you've got a picture of like the mutant in a forest fire and it says, "Never forget 1948. Maybe I'll do a high-res picture of that and versus this so you can read it all or whatever. But this is really, really cool. And I don't know if this is going to be only to limited edition or if they're going to feature that for all the releases. I'm not exactly sure, but that's really cool, man. Like a little, Keen Wild Day permit, self-issue thing. That's just kind of cool. I would imagine this is exclusive to the limited edition as well, a 27-page booklet, of course, which I never, read these things. I look at pictures of these, but I never necessarily read any of it. There's one of the stock nature shots, but you've got the booklet. So that'll about do it for my review of the Prey and the recently released Blu-ray limited edition version from Arrow Video. Not the most ridiculously recommended, I can say these R's, not the most ridiculously recommended movie per se. I mean, there's aspects of it that, it's fun, but it's much more, it's not really a recommended movie, but it's a highly, highly, highly recommended Blu-ray. Do you really need to get the limited edition version with the second disc? Not really. Most people probably aren't really necessarily interested to watch 45 minutes of silent, just daily footage. The international cut, although the gypsy scenes are technically competent, they're not, even if you just watch them on their own, and I mean, it's kind of like a softcore porno actually. It's not really, really that interesting or needed. So, I mean, I'm glad I got it. I'm really glad to have the second disc for the international cut and to see, the cuts that they did make of the original movie and the international one. As I said at the beginning of the reviews, I agree with a lot of them. And then there's three cuts. There's the original cut, the international cut, and then what Arrow Video often does, what they call a composite cut, where presumably they take basically the theatrical version uncut and then also add the gypsy footage into that for the ultimate, the longest version of the movie. But as I said, I agree with most of the cuts of that the international version made to the theatrical one, so I probably will never ever watch that. But so there's three options to watch, or three different ways to watch this movie in this limited edition version. So thank you very much for watching my review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.